Step into History Page, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot brings timeless mysteries to life. In the shadowed halls of Thornfield Hall, a priceless will vanishes, threatening a family's legacy. Was it stolen by greed, fear, or a buried scandal? Hercule Poirot, the master of mysteries, unravels a web of lies, blue silk threads, hidden letters, and a secret child. Who among the elegant guests hides a deadly truth? Step into a world of suspense, where every clue counts and the final twist will leave you stunned. Can Poirot's little grey cells solve the case before the secrets tear the Ashbournes apart? Chapter 1. The Gathering at Thornfield Hall. The late autumn sun hung low over the Devonshire countryside, casting a golden pallor across the manicured lawns of Thornfield Hall. The estate, a sprawling Georgian manor with ivy-clad walls and tall, mullioned windows, stood as a monument to the wealth and prestige of the Ashbourne family. Its grandeur, however, was tempered by an air of quiet melancholy, as though the house itself sensed the gathering storm of secrets among its inhabitants. On this particular evening, November 3rd, 1925, the hall was alive with the soft clink of crystal and the murmur of polite conversation. For the Ashbournes were hosting a weekend gathering, a tradition upheld since the days of the late Sir Reginald Ashbourne. The occasion was ostensibly a celebration of the engagement of Miss Eleanor Ashbourne, the only daughter of Sir Reginald's eldest son, to Mr. Charles Haverford, a barrister of respectable standing. Yet beneath the polished surface of the event, tensions simmered. The guests, a carefully curated circle of family and close associates, moved through the drawing room with the studied grace of those accustomed to masking their true intentions. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal friend of Hercule Poirot, stood near the fireplace, a glass of sherry in hand, observing the assembled company. His military bearing and earnest demeanor made him a natural confidant, though he often felt out of place among such opulence. He noted the guests with a practiced eye, his thoughts drifting to Poirot, who had declined the invitation to join him this weekend, citing a need to arrange his thoughts in London. Hastings sighed, wishing for his friend's keen insight to pierce the subtle undercurrents he sensed in the room. At the center of the gathering, the glittering diamonds at her throat, she spoke in low tones to her brother-in-law, Mr. Lionel Ashbourne, a portly man with a florid complexion and a penchant for port. Lionel's wife, Mrs. Clara Ashbourne, a nervous woman with darting eyes, clung to his arm, her laughter brittle and forced. The younger generation was represented by Miss Sylvia Ashbourne, Lionel's daughter, a vivacious girl of 20 who flitted between guests with a charm that bordered on recklessness. Her laughter rang out too loudly at times, drawing disapproving glances from Lady Beatrice. Then there was Dr. Malcolm Reed, the family physician, a gaunt man in his 40s whose quiet demeanor masked a watchful intensity. He stood apart, nursing a glass of water, his eyes rarely straying from Eleanor. Completing the circle were two outsiders, Mrs. Evelyn Warrender, a distant cousin of the Ashbournes whose sharp wit and knowing smiles suggested a woman well versed in the family's secrets, and Mr. Victor Crane, a solicitor who had managed the Ashbourne estate for decades. Crane, with his stooped posture and thick spectacles, seemed innocuous, yet his presence carried weight, for he was privy to the family's financial intricacies. As the clock struck 8, the butler, Mr. Grayson, a man of impeccable decorum, announced dinner. The guests moved towards the dining room, their footsteps muffled by the thick Persian rugs. Hastings followed, his mind cataloguing the interactions he had observed, the fleeting glance between Sylvia and Charles, the way Lionel's hand tightened on his glass when Eleanor mentioned her late father's will, and the peculiar way Dr. Reed avoided looking at the portrait of Sir Henry that hung above the fireplace. Dinner was a sumptuous affair, with courses of consommé, roasted pheasant, and a delicate lemon soufflé, yet the conversation remained stilted. Lady Beatrice spoke of the estate's history, her voice tinged with pride, while Lionel steered the topic toward the recent fluctuations in the stock market, a subject that seemed to unsettle Clara. Eleanor, seated at the head of the table, maintained a serene composure, though Hastings noticed her fingers tremble slightly as she lifted her wineglass. It was during the dessert course that the first note of discord sounded. Victor Crane. "Sylvia?" Clara's voice was sharp, her eyes wide with reproach. "That is hardly a topic for the dinner table." "Quite right," Lady Beatrice said coldly. "We are here to celebrate, not to dredge up old grievances." Hastings watched the exchange with growing unease. The will, it seemed, was a raw nerve, its details a source of unspoken resentment. He made a mental note to discuss the matter with Poirot, should the opportunity arise. As the meal concluded, the guests retired to the drawing room for coffee. The fire crackled, casting long shadows across the room, and the conversation turned to lighter matters, Eleanor's wedding plans, the beauty of the Devonshire countryside. Yet Hastings could not shake the feeling that something was amiss. The politeness, the smiles, the careful words, they were a veneer, concealing motives as tangled as the ivy that clung to Thornfield Hall. At precisely 10 o'clock, a piercing scream shattered the calm. It came from the library, a room adjacent to the drawing room, its heavy oak doors closed. The guests froze, their faces a tableau of shock and curiosity. Grayson, ever composed, moved swiftly toward the sound, with Hastings and Charles close behind. They found Mrs. Evelyn Warrender standing in the center of the library, her face ashen, her hands trembling. Before her, on the polished mahogany desk, lay a single sheet of paper, a document that, even from a distance, Hastings recognized as significant. It was Sir Henry's will, its edges slightly yellowed, its presence an accusation. "It's gone," Evelyn whispered, her voice barely audible. "The original will. It's been stolen." Hastings felt a chill run through him. The game, it seemed, had begun. Chapter 2. The Vanishing Document. The library of Thornfield Hall was a cavernous room, its walls lined with leather-bound volumes and lit by the soft glow of green-shaded lamps. The air was heavy with the scent of old paper and polished wood, but now it carried a sharper note of alarm. Mrs. Evelyn Warrender stood rooted to the spot, her eyes fixed on the empty space where Sir Henry Ashbourne's will had lain moments before. The single sheet of paper, signature, the wax seal, the notary's mark. And now, she gestured helplessly at the desk. Gone. Lady Beatrice, who had entered the room with the regal poise of a queen, surveyed the scene with narrowed eyes. "This is absurd," she declared. "The will has been secure in this house for 3 years since my husband's death. Why should it vanish now, on the eve of Eleanor's engagement?" "Perhaps," said Lionel Ashburn, his voice thick with unease, "someone thought to review its contents." His eyes darted towards his wife, Clara, whose hands twisted nervously in her lap. "Nonsense!" Sylvia Ashburn's voice cut through the tension, her tone defiant. "If someone took it, they had a reason." "And I'd wager it's not just curiosity." Her gaze lingered on Charles, who stiffened but said nothing. Hastings, ever observant, noted the undercurrents in the room. The will, it seemed, was more than a legal document. It was a Pandora's box of motives, its disappearance a spark to smoldering resentments. He stepped closer to the desk, examining the copy Evelyn had found. The text was dense, written in the precise hand of a solicitor, but it bore no seal or signature, merely a draft, useless in a court of law. The drawer itself showed no signs of forced entry, its lock intact, suggesting the thief had access to a key. "Grayson," Hastings called to the butler, who stood discreetly by the door. "Who has access to this desk?" Grayson,
his face a mask of professional calm, replied, "The keys are held by Lady Beatrice, Mr. Victor Crane and myself, sir. The desk is rarely opened, save for matters concerning the estate." "And when was it last opened?" Hastings pressed. "This afternoon, sir, by Mr. Crane. He wished to review some documents related to the estate's accounts. I unlocked it for him at approximately 4 o'clock. All eyes turned to Victor Crane, who blinked rapidly behind his spectacles. I assure you, the will was there when I left," he stammered. "I locked the drawer myself. I had no reason to touch it." "Then how do you explain its absence?"
His tailored suit and polished shoes surveyed the room with his characteristic calm. His mustache twitched slightly, a sign of amusement or contemplation, and his green eyes gleamed with curiosity. "Poirot!" Hastings exclaimed. "How on earth—" "A telegram from London, mon cher Hastings," Poirot said, producing a folded paper from his pocket. "I received word from an old friend, Mr. Crane, who hinted at irregularities at Thornfield Hall. I took the evening train, and here I am." Crane flushed, clearly surprised by Poirot's revelation. "I only mentioned the family's concerns in passing," he said defensively. "I didn't expect—" "No matter," Poirot interrupted, raising a hand. "The matter of the missing will is most intriguing. Permit me, if you please, to examine the scene." He moved to the desk with the grace of a cat, his eyes scanning every detail: the copy of the will, the undisturbed lock, the faint scratch on the desk's surface. He knelt to inspect the floor, his fingers brushing the rug, then stood and turned to the assembled company. "The will, it was kept in this drawer always, oui?" "Yes," Lady Beatrice confirmed. "Since my husband's death, it has remained here, under lock and key." "And who knew of its location?" Poirot's question was gentle, but his gaze was piercing. "Only those closest to the family," Lady Beatrice replied. "Myself, Mr. Crane, Grayson, and— well, I suppose Eleanor and Lionel were aware, as beneficiaries." "And I," Evelyn added quickly. "As a cousin, I was privy to the estate's affairs." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Bon, then we have a circle of suspects, each with access, each with, let us say, possibilities. Tell me, Madame Warrender, when you saw the will this evening, was anyone else in the library?" Evelyn hesitated, her eyes flickering toward Sylvia. "No one. That is, I was alone, but I heard footsteps in the hall just before I entered." "Footsteps?" Poirot repeated, his tone thoughtful. "And at what time was this?" "9:30, perhaps," she replied. "I didn't check the clock."
"This is no accident, mes amis. This is a crime of intention." That room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the guests. Hastings watched as Poirot's gaze moved from face to face, each person shifting uncomfortably under his scrutiny. The little gray cells, Hastings knew, were already at work, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that promised to be as complex as it was sinister. Chapter 3. The Belgian Detective Takes the Stage. The library at Thornfield Hall, with its towering bookshelves and flickering lamplight, seemed to shrink under the presence of Hercule Poirot. The diminutive Belgian detective stood at the center of the room, his posture erect, his hands clasped behind his back, exuding an air of quiet authority. The guests, still reeling from the shock of the missing will, watched him with a mixture of curiosity and unease. Captain Arthur Hastings, positioned near the fireplace, felt a familiar thrill at seeing his friend take command of a mystery. Poirot's arrival, as always, was like the turning of a key in a lock. Order would soon emerge from chaos. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and precise, "we are faced with a crime most deliberate. the theft of a document that holds the fate of this family. The will of Sir Henry Ashbourne is not merely paper and ink. It is a map of motives, a chart of desires. Its disappearance suggests a mind both bold and cunning. But fear not, Hercule Poirot does not permit such minds to triumph. Lady Beatrice, seated in a high-backed chair, raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Poirot, surely this is a matter for the police. A simple theft does not require such theatricality." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign Hastings recognized as mild amusement. "Madame, a theft of this nature is never simple. The will governs the distribution of a considerable fortune, does it not? And where there is fortune, there is envy, greed, perhaps even fear. No, this is a matter for the little grey cells, and I shall pursue it with method." Charles Haverford cleared his throat, his barrister's composure intact but strained. "Mr. Poirot, until 9:30. Lady Beatrice, Miss Eleanor, and Mrs. Clara remained in the drawing-room. Poirot turned to Sylvia, whose cheeks flushed under his scrutiny. "Mademoiselle Sylvia, you sought a shawl. Where did you go?" Sylvia tossed her head, her dark curls bouncing. "To my room, upstairs. I was gone no more than 10 minutes. I didn't come near the library." "And yet," Poirot said softly, "the library is on the route from the drawing-room to the staircase. Is it not?" Sylvia's eyes narrowed. "Are you accusing me, Mr. Poirot?" "Not accusing, mademoiselle." Observing Poirot's tone was gentle but unyielding. He turned to Charles. "Monsieur Haverford, your cigarette on the terrace, how long did it take?" Charles frowned, as if calculating. 5 minutes, perhaps 7. I stepped out through the French doors in the drawing-room, smoked, and returned. The library was out of my path. Poirot nodded, then addressed Dr. Reed. "And you, monsieur, the conservatory? A curious place to visit during a social gathering." Dr. Reed's thin lips pressed into a line. "I have an interest in botany," he said curtly. "The Ashbournes keep a fine collection of orchids. I wish to examine them." "Alone?" Poirot's question hung in the air. "Yes," Reed replied, his gaze steady but guarded. Poirot paced slowly before the desk, his polished shoes clicking on the hardwood floor. "Bon. We have movements, but movements alone do not tell the story. Let us consider the desk itself." He knelt again, examining the lock with a small magnifying glass he produced from his pocket. "No scratches, no signs of force. The thief used a key, or they were most skilled. Monsieur Grayson, you are certain only 3 keys exist?" "Yes, sir," Grayson replied. "Lady Beatrice's is kept in her private safe. Mr. Crane's is on his person, and mine is in the butler's pantry, locked away." "And yet," Poirot mused, "the drawer was opened without damage. Curious, no?" Lionel Ashburn, his face flushed from port, interjected. "This is all speculation. What if the will was taken earlier, before dinner? What now?" "Replace?" she whispered, her hand tightening on Charles's arm. "You mean a forgery?" Poirot inclined his head. "It is possible, mademoiselle. A new will, with different terms, could alter the fortunes of many in this room." The air grew thick with suspicion. Hastings watched as each guest's expression shifted. Lady Beatrice's icy calm, Lionel's bluster, Sylvia's defiance, Reed's guarded silence. Even Grayson, the unflappable butler, seemed momentarily unsettled. "I propose," Poirot continued, "that we search the house at once, not with the chaos of a mob, but with method. Each room, each person's belongings must be examined, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall oversee it, to ensure fairness." Lady Beatrice rose, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "This is outrageous. You suggest we submit to a search like common criminals?" "Madame," Poirot replied, A crime has been committed in your home. To refuse is to invite suspicion. I seek only the truth." After a tense pause, Lady Beatrice nodded curtly. "Very well, but I expect discretion, Mr. Poirot." "Discretion," Poirot said with a slight bow, "is my profession." As the guests dispersed to their rooms, accompanied by Grayson and Poirot's watchful eye, Hastings lingered in the library. He approached his friend, lowering his voice. "Poirot, do you think the will is still in the house?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Mon cher Hastings, the will is but a piece of the puzzle. The true question is not where it is, but why it was taken. And that, I suspect, lies in the hearts of those who dined with us tonight." As the clock struck 11, the search began, and Hastings felt the weight of an unfolding drama. The little gray cells, he knew, were only just beginning to unravel the secrets of Thornfield Hall. Chapter 4. The Interrogations Begin. The search of Thornfield Hall yielded nothing by midnight, and the guests, weary and resentful, retired to their rooms under the watchful eye of Grayson. Hercule Poirot, however, remained in the library, his small frame silhouetted against the dying fire as he studied the copy of Sir Henry's will. Captain Interrogations. The following morning, November 4th, 1925, Poirot gathered the household in the morning room, a bright space with tall windows overlooking the frost-kissed lawns. The guests sat in a semicircle, their faces a mixture of irritation and apprehension. Lady Beatrice presided at the head of the table, her expression one of barely concealed impatience. Eleanor and Charles sat close, their hands intertwined, while Sylvia fidgeted with a lace handkerchief. Lionel and Clara exchanged uneasy glances, and Dr. Reed maintained his usual air of detached observation. Victor Crane, clutching a leather satchel, looked as though he wished to be anywhere else, while Evelyn Warrender's sharp eyes missed nothing. Poirot stood before them, his hands clasped, his voice calm but commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs, the disappearance of the will is no accident. It is a deliberate act, and each of you, I regret to say, has the means to have committed it. But Hercule Poirot does not accuse without evidence. I observe, I question, I deduce. Let us begin." He turned first to Lady Beatrice, whose regal posture stiffened. "Madame, you hold a key to the desk. Tell me, when did you last see the will?" Lady Beatrice's lips thinned. "I have not opened that drawer in months, Mr. Poirot. My husband's wishes were clear, and I had no need to revisit them. The will was in Mr. Crane's care." Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to the solicitor. "Monsieur Crane, you were in the library at 4 o'clock yesterday, oui? You opened the drawer. Describe what you saw." Crane adjusted his spectacles, his hands trembling slightly. "The will was there, as always, in a sealed envelope with Sir Henry's crest. I checked the accounts ledger beside it, locked the drawer and left. I swear it." "And you noticed nothing unusual?" Poirot pressed. "Nothing," Crane said, though his eyes darted toward Lionel. Poirot's moustache twitched. "Bon. Mademoiselle Sylvia, you left the drawing room at 9:15. Your shawl, did you find it?" "Orchids. I was alone, and I saw no one near the library." Poirot paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking on the parquet floor. "Each of you claims innocence, yet the will is gone. Let us consider the motives. The will, it divides a fortune. Mademoiselle Eleanor, as the primary beneficiary, you stand to gain the most. But perhaps someone wishes to challenge this." Eleanor's eyes widened, but her voice was steady. "I have no need to steal what is already mine. My father's wishes were clear, and I honor them."
Indeed, Poirot said, turning to Lionel. Monsieur Ashburn, you are a beneficiary, but perhaps not to the extent you hoped. Were you dissatisfied? Lionel's face reddened. That's preposterous. I loved my brother, and his will was fair. I've no cause to meddle with it. Clara clutched his arm, her voice trembling. Lionel would never do such a thing. He's a good man. Poirot's gaze softened, but only for a moment. Madame Warrender, you are a cousin. Yet you knew of the will's contents. Did you, perhaps, find its terms unjust? Evelyn's laugh was sharp. Unjust? Hardly. I have no claim to the Ashburn fortune, and I don't covet it. I only noticed the will was gone because I know this house's secrets better than most. Poirot paused, his eyes sweeping the room. Secrets, oui, and secrets are the currency of this crime. Let us consider a detail. The copy of the will left on the desk. Why leave a copy which cannot be used, yet take the original? It is a message, perhaps, or a distraction. Hastings, scribbling in his notebook, looked up. A distraction, Poirot? You mean a red herring? Précisément, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. The thief wishes us to focus on the copy, to argue over its presence, while the true purpose remains hidden. But Hercule Poirot is not so easily misled. He turned to Grayson, who stood by the door. Monsieur Grayson, a question. The butler's pantry, where your key is kept, is it always locked? Yes, sir, Grayson replied.
Poirot's methodical mind was already weaving a net, one that would soon ensnare the guilty. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The morning room of Thornfield Hall, bathed in the pale light of November 4th, 1925, buzzed with the tension of a tightly wound spring. Hercule Poirot's interrogations had left the guests uneasy, their polite facades cracking under the weight of suspicion. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated near a window with his notebook, watched as Poirot paced before the assembled company, his small frame radiating a quiet intensity. The Belgian detective's eyes, sharp and unyielding, seemed to pierce each guest's defenses, seeking the truth hidden beneath their carefully crafted alibis. Poirot paused, his hands clasped behind his back, and addressed the room. Mesdames et messieurs, the theft of the will is a puzzle, but one with many false paths, red herrings, as my friend Hastings would say. Someone in this house wishes to lead us astray, to point the finger at an obvious culprit. But Hercule Poirot is not so easily deceived. Lady Beatrice, her lips pursed, spoke first. Mr. Poirot, this talk of deception is tiresome. If you have evidence, present it. Otherwise, I see no reason to prolong this farce. Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of amusement. Madame, evidence is like a fine wine. It requires time to mature. But let us examine a curious detail. The copy of the will left on the desk. It is, I suspect, a deliberate clue, meant to distract us from the true motive. Charles Haverford, his barrister's composure fraying, leaned forward. A distraction? Surely the thief took the will to alter the inheritance. What else could it be? Poirot raised a finger. A question most natural, Monsieur Haverford, but too simple. The copy suggests the thief wished us to know the will was taken. Why not remove both? No, this is a game of psychology, and we must play it carefully. Hastings noted the unease that rippled through the room. Sylvia Ashbourne, twisting her handkerchief, avoided Poirot's gaze, while Lionel Ashbourne's florid face grew redder. The room erupted in murmurs. Sylvia snapped, "Are you saying one of us climbed through a window? That's absurd." "Absurd?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Mademoiselle, in my experience, the absurd is often the truth in disguise.
Let us consider another detail. The footsteps Madame Warrender heard at 9:30. They were light, you said, oui? Evelyn nodded. Yes, light but hurried, as if someone were trying not to be heard. Poirot turned to Sylvia. Mademoiselle, your shawl excursion took you past the library. Were your footsteps light? Sylvia's eyes flashed. I wasn't sneaking about, if that's what you mean. I walked as I always do. And yet, Poirot said, the timing is precise. 9:30, the will is seen. 10 o'clock, it is gone. The footsteps are a clue, but perhaps not to the thief. Perhaps to a witness. The suggestion hung in the air, and Hastings scribbled furiously, sensing Poirot was baiting the room. Eleanor, pale but composed, spoke up. Mr. Poirot, are you suggesting someone saw the theft and said nothing? Précisément, mademoiselle, Poirot replied. Silence is a powerful weapon. But let us turn to another matter, the contents of the will itself. Monsieur Crane, you are the solicitor. Tell us, what did Sir Henry's will stipulate? Crane cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. Sir Henry left the bulk of the estate, Thornfield Hall, its lands, and the majority of his fortune to Miss Eleanor. Mr. Lionel received a smaller share, including a London property and a modest trust. Mrs. Warrender was bequeathed a stipend, and there were provisions for the staff, including Grayson. The rest was divided among minor charities. And you, Monsieur Haverford? Poirot asked, turning to Charles. As Eleanor's fiancé, you stand to benefit indirectly. Were you aware of the will's terms? Charles stiffened. I knew Eleanor was the primary heir, but I have no interest in her fortune. My own income is sufficient. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Bon. Yet the will... Hastings knew better. His friend was planting seeds, watching for reactions. The detective clapped his hands, startling Clara. Eh bien, we have made progress. The red herrings, the copy, the alibis, the footsteps, they obscure the truth, but not for long. I shall continue my observations. For now, I ask that you remain vigilant. The thief is among us, and they will make a mistake. As the guests dispersed, Hastings followed Poirot to the library, where the detective examined the desk once more. Poirot, Hastings said, you're pushing them hard. Do you think one of them will crack? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Mon cher, a red herring is only effective until the fisherman grows wise. Someone in this house believes they have outwitted us, but the little gray cells, they are patient. We shall see who blinks first. Outside, the wind howled across the Devonshire moors, and Hastings felt the weight of an unseen presence, a thief, perhaps, or something darker, lurking within the walls of Thornfield Hall. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The morning of November 4th, 1925, gave way to a gray, oppressive afternoon, the skies above Thornfield Hall heavy with the promise of rain. Inside, the atmosphere was no less foreboding, as the shadow of the missing will hung over the household. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the lack of tangible evidence, had taken to pacing the library, his polished shoes clicking rhythmically on the hardwood floor. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the faithful chronicler, sat at a side table, his notebook filled with observations, though he privately admitted to feeling at a loss. The little Belgian detective, however, was in his element, his eyes alight with the thrill of the chase. Mon cher Hastings, Poirot said, pausing by the desk where the will had vanished. The solution to this mystery lies not in what is seen, but in what is overlooked. A detail, small and seemingly insignificant, will unlock the truth.
Hastings looked up, intrigued. "A detail, Poirot. You've found something, haven't you?" Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile.
Poirot's gaze shifted to the rug beneath the desk, where he knelt and brushed his hand across the fibres. "Regardez, Hastings, a thread caught in the weave." He plucked a single, fine strand of blue silk, holding it to the light. "Most interesting. This is not from the rug which is red, nor from the desk. It is foreign to this room." Hastings frowned. "A thread? From someone's clothing, perhaps?" "Précisément," Poirot said, slipping the thread into a small envelope. "And it is a clue that speaks to the thief's identity, or to someone who was here at the critical moment." Leaving the library, Poirot requested Grayson to summon the household to the drawing-room once more. The guests assembled reluctantly, their faces etched with fatigue and suspicion. Lady Beatrice sat with her usual regal air, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Eleanor and Charles stood close, their expressions guarded, while Sylvia's restless energy seemed barely contained. Lionel mopped his brow with a handkerchief, and Clara's hands trembled in her lap. Dr. Reed, as ever, observed silently, while Evelyn Warrender's sharp gaze followed Poirot's every move. Victor Crane clutched his satchel, his knuckles white. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, holding up the envelope with the thread, "a discovery has been made. A small thing, perhaps, but in the hands of Hercule Poirot no detail is too small. This thread, found beneath the desk, does not belong in the library. Who among you wore blue silk last evening?" A murmur rippled through the room. Sylvia's hand went to her throat where a blue silk scarf was loosely tied. "I wore a scarf like that," she admitted, her voice defiant. "But I told you I wasn't in the library." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And yet, mademoiselle, the thread is here. Perhaps you passed through without realizing, or perhaps someone else wore blue silk?" Eleanor spoke up, her voice soft but firm. "I wore a blue gown last night, but I was in the drawing-room with Mother and Clara after dinner. I never entered the library." Poirot nodded, turning to Clara. "Madame Ashburn, your attire—" 9:25, oui? Grayson nodded. "Yes, sir. I saw her re-enter the drawing-room at that time." "Then the footsteps at 9:30 cannot be hers," Poirot said, his tone triumphant. "Someone else was near the library, someone who has not accounted for their movements." The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words sinking in. Hastings scribbled furiously, sensing a shift in the investigation. Poirot paced, his voice growing softer, more deliberate. "There is more. The scratch on the desk, it is not from the lock, but from something placed upon it, perhaps a tool or ornament. Who among you carries such an item?" No one spoke, but Hastings noticed Dr. Reed's hand twitch slightly, as if resisting the urge to reach into his pocket. Poirot, too, seemed to notice, but he said nothing, instead turning to Charles. "Monsieur Haverford, as a barrister you understand the law. If the will is not found, what happens to the estate?" Charles hesitated, glancing at Eleanor. "Without the original will, the estate would be subject to intestacy laws. It would be divided among Sir Henry's heirs, primarily Eleanor and Lionel, as his closest relatives. But it could be contested, especially if a new will were to surface." "A new will," Poirot repeated, his eyes narrowing. "A most dangerous possibility, and one that gives motive to many in this room." Lady Beatrice rose, her voice sharp. "This is intolerable, Mr. Poirot. You cast suspicion on us all without proof. I demand you cease these insinuations." "Madame," Poirot said, bowing slightly, "I seek only the truth, and the truth, it is close. The thread, the scratch, the footsteps, they are pieces of a puzzle. Soon they will form a picture. As the guests dispersed, their murmurs filled with unease. Hastings approached Poirot. "That thread, Poirot, it's a solid clue. Do you think Sylvia's lying?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The thread, mon cher, is but a thread. It points to a presence, not a crime. The true clue lies in the contradiction of said," adjusting his tie with a precise flick. "The little grey cells. They sense a fracture in the harmony of this household. The thread, the footsteps, the scratch, they are clues, oui, but they are nothing without the human heart. Today we shall probe deeper, and the lies, they will surface." Hastings, his notebook open, nodded eagerly. "You think someone's hiding something big, don't you? That thread, Sylvia's scarf, Eleanor's gown, it's got to point to one of them." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Patience, mon ami. The thread is a whisper, not a shout. We must listen to the silences, the hesitations. Come, let us gather the household once more." The drawing room, its heavy curtains drawn against the rain, was a stage for Poirot's next act. The guests assembled with reluctance, their faces etched with weariness and suspicion. Lady Beatrice sat rigidly, her mourning dress stark against the room's opulence. Eleanor and Charles, ever close, exchanged quiet words, while Sylvia's restless energy manifested in the tapping of her foot. Lionel mopped his brow, his wife Clara pale and trembling beside him. Dr. Malcolm Reed's cool gaze followed Poirot, and Evelyn Warrender's sharp smile hinted at secrets unspoken. Victor Crane, clutching his satchel, seemed to shrink under the weight of scrutiny. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and commanding, "the theft of the will is a crime of calculation, but it is also a crime of passion. Someone in this room knows more than they have admitted. Let us explore the motives, the hidden currents beneath the surface of Thornfield Hall." He turned to Lionel, whose florid face reddened further. "Monsieur Ashburn, you are a man of business. The will grants you a London property and a trust, but it is a modest share compared to Mademoiselle Eleanor's. Were you content with this?" Lionel's hand tightened on his handkerchief. "I've said it before, Poirot. I loved my brother. His will was his choice. I've no quarrel with it." Clara's voice trembled as she interjected. "Lionel would never steal. He's been nothing but loyal to this family." Poirot's eyes softened. "But you this. There's bad blood here, and it's not just about money. Sir Henry wasn't a saint, you know." The room stilled, and Hastings leaned forward, sensing a revelation. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Madame Warrender, you speak of bad blood. Enlighten us." Evelyn hesitated, her smile fading. "Henry, he had a temper. He and Lionel quarreled often, especially about the estate's management, and there were rumors, affairs, debts, things swept under the rug." Lionel slammed his fist on the arm of his chair. "That's slander, Evelyn! My brother and I had our differences, but we settled them long before his death." "Did you?" Poirot asked, his tone deceptively mild. "Or did those differences linger, perhaps influencing the will's terms?" Before Lionel could respond, Eleanor spoke, her voice steady but strained. "Mr. Poirot, my father loved this family. His will was meant to protect us, not divide us. I don't believe anyone here would steal it out of spite." Poirot inclined his head. "Your loyalty is admirable, mademoiselle. But let us consider another possibility, a secret, hidden in the will itself. Monsieur Crane, you drafted the document. Was there anything unusual in its provisions?" Crane's hands shook as he adjusted his spectacles. "It was a standard will, sir. The main bequests were to Miss Eleanor and Mr. Lionel, as I said. There was a clause, however, that, well, it required confidentiality. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A clause? Speak. Monsieur Crane glanced nervously at Lady Beatrice, who nodded curtly. It concerned a small bequest, he said, to a person outside the immediate family, a sum of money, to be paid anonymously. Sir Henry insisted on it. A murmur ran through the room. Sylvia's eyes widened, and Dr. Reed's fingers tightened on the armrest. Hastings scribbled, sensing the weight of this revelation. Poirot pressed forward. And who was this beneficiary, Monsieur Crane? I cannot say, Crane stammered. Sir Henry forbade it. The name was sealed in the will, to be revealed only. The lies we heard today, Lionel's anger, Evelyn's insinuations, Crane's hesitation, they point to deeper truths. Someone in this house is protecting a secret, and the will is their shield, or their weapon. The wind carried a chill, and Hastings shivered, sensing the mystery tightening its grip on Thornfield Hall. The little grey cells, he knew, were closing in on the truth, one lie at a time. Live Alteramum, the emotional turning point. The rain had ceased by the evening of November 4th, 1925, leaving Thornfield Hall cloaked in a damp, oppressive stillness. The revelations of the day, the blue silk thread, the scratch on the desk, the secret bequest in Sir Henry's will, had frayed the nerves of the household, and the air in the drawing room was thick with unspoken accusations. Hercule Poirot, his demeanor as precise as ever, stood before the gathered guests, his green eyes scanning their faces for the crack that would reveal the truth. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated near the fire, felt the tension building, sensing that the investigation was nearing a pivotal moment. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice calm, but carrying an undercurrent of intensity. We have uncovered much, yet the heart of this mystery remains hidden. The theft of the will is not merely a crime of greed, it is a crime of the heart, of secrets buried deep. Tonight one of you will break, and the truth will begin to emerge. Lady Beatrice, her face pale against her black mourning dress, fixed Poirot with a steely glare. Mr. Poirot, your theatrics grow tiresome. If you have accusations, make them plainly. Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of amusement. Madame, the truth is not served by haste, but by precision. Let us revisit a detail. The footsteps heard by Madame Warrender at 9:30. They were light, hurried, and yet no one admits to being near the library at that time. This is a contradiction, and contradictions, they lead to confessions. He turned to Sylvia Ashbourne, whose restless energy had given way to a nervous pallor. Mademoiselle Sylvia, you were quick to deny entering the library, yet the blue silk thread matches your scarf. You passed the library door at 9:15, you say. Reddened. Sylvia, why didn't you say this before? He demanded, his voice thick with anger. Because I knew how it would look, Sylvia snapped, tears welling in her eyes. Everyone's so quick to judge me, to think I'm some reckless girl chasing money. I saw the desk was closed and I left. That's all. Poirot nodded, as if expecting this. Merci, mademoiselle. Your truth is a step forward, but it raises a question. Did you see anyone else near the library? Sylvia hesitated, her gaze flickering to Dr. Malcolm Reed, who sat stone-faced. I thought I heard someone in the hall as I left, but I didn't see who it was. It was just a creak, maybe the house settling. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A creak or a person? This is most interesting. He turned to Dr. Reed, whose fingers tightened on the armrest. Doctor, you were in the conservatory at 9:25, examining orchids.
Yet the conservatory is near the library's rear entrance. Did you perhaps hear or see Mademoiselle Sylvia? Reed's voice was cold, measured. I was focused on the orchids, Mr. Poirot. I heard nothing, saw nothing. Poirot's smile was faint but piercing. Nothing, monsieur? The little grey cells. They wonder why a man of science is so vague about his movements. Before Reed could respond, Clara Ashbourne, her face ashen, stood abruptly, her voice trembling. "Stop this! I can't bear it any longer!" The room froze, all eyes on her. Lionel reached for her, but she pulled away, her hands shaking. I was near the library last night. I didn't tell you because I was afraid." "Clara!" Lionel exclaimed, his voice a mix of shock and fear. "What are you saying?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I couldn't sleep after dinner. I went to the library to find something to read, to calm my nerves. It was just before 10. The door was ajar, and I saw someone at the desk." Poirot's posture straightened, his voice soft but commanding. Madame Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Bon, we now have a witness to the crime, though the thief remains a phantom. But phantoms, they leave traces. He produced the envelope containing the blue silk thread. This thread, found beneath the desk, connects to Mademoiselle Sylvia's scarf. Yet, she denies touching the desk. Madame Clara's shadow suggests another presence. The pieces, they begin to align." Lady Beatrice's voice cut through the tension. "This is madness, Mr. Poirot. My daughter-in-law is distraught, and Sylvia has admitted her presence. Why torment us further?" "Madame," Poirot replied, "torment is not my aim. The truth is. And the truth, it is close. Someone in this room knows more than they have said. The shadow, the thread, the secret bequest, they are threads of a tapestry. And soon, we shall see the whole." As the guests dispersed, Clara sobbing quietly in Lionel's arms, Hastings approached Poirot. "Clara's confession. It's a game-changer, isn't it? Someone was caught in the act." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "A confession, mon cher, is only as strong as its truth. Madame Clara has given us a piece of the puzzle. But is it the whole? The shadow she saw. Perhaps it was the thief, or perhaps it was another, watching the thief. We must tread carefully, for the heart of this mystery beats with deception." Outside, the wind stirred the bare branches, and Hastings felt the weight of the unseen shadow looming over Thornfield Hall, its secrets teetering on the edge of revelation. Chapter 9. The Trap. The evening of November 4th, 1925, cast Thornfield Hall in a shroud of unease, the rain-soaked grounds reflecting the turmoil within. Clara Ashbourne's tearful confession had cracked the facade of the household, and the shadow she saw at the library desk loomed large in everyone's minds. Hercule Poirot, ever the orchestrator, sensed the moment was ripe to tighten the net. In the drawing-room, where the fire crackled fitfully, he gathered the guests once more, his small frame commanding the space with an air of quiet inevitability. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated with his notebook, felt the tension coiling, knowing Poirot was about to spring a trap. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice smooth but edged with purpose. "The theft of Sir Henry's will is a puzzle, nearing its solution. The blue silk thread, the scratch on the desk, the shadow seen by Madame Clara. These are not mere clues, but threads in a web of deception. Tonight I shall apply pressure, and the guilty, they will reveal themselves." Lady Beatrice, her face a mask of indignation, spoke sharply. "Mr. Poirot, you have accused us all in turn. This constant probing is intolerable. If you know the thief, name them." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching. "Madame, to name the guilty too soon is to spoil the game. The thief is clever, but not infallible. Let us reconstruct the evening of the theft, step by step, and see where the truth stumbles." He paced before the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back. At 9:30, Madame Warrender saw the will in the desk drawer. At 10 o'clock it was gone, replaced by a copy. Madame Clara saw a shadow at the desk just before 10, and Mademoiselle Sylvia admits to entering the library briefly at 9:15. The footsteps heard at 9:30, light and hurried, suggest another presence. But there is more, a detail overlooked. Poirot paused, producing the small envelope containing the blue silk thread. This thread, found beneath the desk, matches Mademoiselle Sylvia's scarf. Yet she claims she did not approach the desk. Let us test this. He turned to Sylvia.
No new threads. The rug is clean today, but last night it caught a trace of the truth. Sylvia snapped. I didn't touch the desk. I swear it. Poirot rose, his gaze piercing. Then how, mademoiselle, did your thread come to be there? Unless another wore blue silk, or someone placed it to mislead us. The room murmured, and Hastings scribbled, sensing Poirot's trap closing. The detective turned to Clara. Madame Ashburn, you saw the shadow at the desk. Describe it again, every detail. Clara, her hands trembling, spoke haltingly. It was tall, I think, and quick. I heard the drawer close, and I ran. I couldn't see their face. Tall, Poirot repeated, his eyes sweeping the men. Charles Haverford, broad-shouldered and over 6 feet. Lionel Ashburn, stout but tall. Dr. Reed, lean but equally tall. And Victor Crane, stooped and shorter. This narrows our field, does it not? Charles bristled. You can't seriously think I'd steal my fiancée's inheritance. I was on the terrace, as I said. Indeed, Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. But the terrace is near the library's French doors. A quick step inside, perhaps, while the others were distracted? That's absurd, Eleanor cried, gripping Charles's arm. He would never. Poirot raised a hand. Mademoiselle, loyalty is admirable, but truth is impartial. Let us consider another possibility. The secret bequest in the will. Monsieur Crane, you have withheld the beneficiary's name. Why? Crane's hands shook, his spectacles slipping. Sir Henry insisted on anonymity. It was a delicate matter, a personal debt he wished to settle. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A debt? To whom? Speak, monsieur, or the suspicion falls on you. Crane glanced nervously at Lady Beatrice, who nodded curtly. It was to a woman, he admitted, his voice barely audible. A former acquaintance of Sir Henry's. I cannot say more without betraying his confidence. The room erupted in gasps. Evelyn Warrender's laugh was sharp. An acquaintance? Oh, Henry, you old rogue! No wonder the will was sensitive. Lady Beatrice restored. As you wish, sir. As the guests dispersed, their faces a mix of fear and suspicion, Hastings followed Poirot to the library. A trap, Poirot? You think the thief will come back? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Mon cher, the thief is bold but not reckless. They will not return for the will. It is likely hidden or destroyed. But they may seek to cover their tracks or to plant another clue. We shall watch, and the little grey cells they shall see. As darkness fell over Thornfield Hall, the library stood silent, its shadows hiding the truth. Hastings, stationed in a darkened corner with Poirot, felt the weight of the trap, knowing that the next move would bring them closer to the heart of the mystery, or to danger. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The night of November 4th, 1925, enveloped Thornfield Hall in a heavy silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the old house settling under the weight of its secrets. The library, dimly lit by a single lamp, stood as the stage for Hercule Poirot's carefully laid trap. Captain Arthur Hastings, concealed in the shadows behind a bookcase with Poirot, felt his heart pound with anticipation. The Belgian detective, his eyes gleaming in the faint light, was as still as a statue, his senses attuned to the slightest sound. The trap had been set, and now they waited to see who would step into it. "Patience, mon cher," Poirot whispered, his voice barely audible. "The guilty, they are restless. They will come." The hours crept by, the grandfather clock in the hall striking midnight, then 1. Hastings stifled a yawn, but Poirot remained alert, his gaze fixed on the library door. At 1:30, a faint noise, a soft tread on the rug outside, broke the silence. The door creaked open, and a figure slipped inside, cloaked in shadow. Hastings held his breath as the figure moved toward the desk, their movements swift but cautious. Poirot's hand tightened on his arm, signaling silence. The figure paused at the desk, their hand reaching for the drawer. A glint of metal flashed in the lamplight, a key. Before they could—
"Messieurs, the mystery of the missing will is solved. The thief stands before us. Dr. Malcolm Reed." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Eleanor clutched Charles's arm, while Sylvia's eyes narrowed. Lionel blustered, "This is outrageous!" "Reed, a thief!" Poirot's gaze never left Reed, who stood rigid, his hands clenched. "Doctor, you will deny it, of course, but let us reconstruct the crime, step by step, and the little gray cells will reveal the truth." He paced before the desk, his voice steady and precise. "The will was stolen between 9:30 and 10 o'clock on November 3rd. Madame Warrender saw it at 9:30, and by 10 it was gone, replaced by a copy. Madame Clara saw a shadow at the desk just before 10, a tall figure, she said. You, doctor, are tall, and your movements in the conservatory placed you near the library's rear entrance." Reed's voice was icy. "I was examining orchids, as I said. You have no proof." "Proof?" Poirot's mustache twitched. The blue silk thread found beneath the desk was a clever misdirection, planted to implicate Mademoiselle Sylvia. But the scratch on the desk, made by your medical scissors, betrayed you. I observed your hand twitch yesterday, as if to conceal them, and tonight you returned with a key, stolen perhaps from the butler's pantry through the unlatched window. Reed's composure faltered, his eyes darting to the door. Poirot continued, relentless. The motive lies in the secret bequest, a sum to an anonymous woman, a former acquaintance of Sir Henry. You knew her, did you not? As Sir Henry's physician, you were privy to his confidences. This woman, she was your sister, and the bequest was a payment for her silence about a scandal, one that would ruin your reputation if exposed. The room erupted in murmurs. Evelyn Warrender's laugh was sharp. A sister! Henry, you devil! Reed's face paled, his voice hoarse. You're wrong, Poirot. I have no sister. Non? Poirot produced a small photograph from his pocket, found during a discreet search of Reed's room earlier that day. This is her, oui? A woman whose existence you hid, whose connection to will is restored. But the truth, it leaves scars. The scandal, it will be for you to judge, Madame Beatrice. As for Dr. Reed, the police will decide his fate. As Grayson escorted Reed to his room to await the authorities, the household stood in stunned silence. Hastings approached Poirot, his voice low. You knew it was him all along, didn't you? Poirot's eyes twinkled. The little gray cells, mon cher. They see what the heart hides. The scissors, the timing, the motive. They pointed to Reed. But I needed him to act, to confirm his guilt. The fire crackled, casting long shadows across the library. The will, now returned,
lay on the desk, a testament to Poirot's genius. But Hastings knew the scars of this night would linger, a reminder that even in victory, the truth could wound. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The morning of November 5th, 1925, dawned crisp and clear over Thornfield Hall, the storm clouds of the previous days giving way to a pale blue sky. The restoration of Sir Henry Ashbourne's will had brought a semblance of order to the household, but the air remained heavy with the aftershocks of Dr. Malcolm Reed's confession. The library, once the epicenter of the mystery, now stood quiet, its shelves and desk bathed in soft sunlight. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed as always, sat in a high-backed chair, sipping a tisane prepared by Grayson. Captain Arthur Hastings, his notebook now filled with the details of the case, sat opposite, watching his friend with a mix of admiration and curiosity. "Poirot," Hastings said, setting down his pen, "you've done it again. The will is back, Reed's in custody, and the family can move forward. But I must say I didn't see it coming." "How did you know it was him?" Poirot's green eyes twinkled as he placed his cup delicately on its saucer. "Mon cher Hastings, the solution was always in the details. The little gray cells, they do not rest until every piece fits. The blue silk thread was a clever ruse, meant to point to Mademoiselle Sylvia, but it was too convenient. The scratch on the desk, made by Dr. Reed's medical scissors, was the true clue.
You are dead. The will is restored, and Eleanor's future is secure. But this scandal. It pains me to think of Henry's memory so tainted." Poirot rose, bowing slightly. "Madame, the truth is a bitter medicine, but it heals." Sir Henry's indiscretion. It was a human failing, not a measure of his love for you or Mademoiselle Eleanor. You must decide how to honor his memory, and whether to honor the bequest. Lady Beatrice nodded, her eyes distant. "I shall consult with Eleanor and Lionel. The woman, whoever she is, will receive what Henry intended, discreetly. As for Dr. Reed, I trust the law will be just." "Justice," Poirot said, his tone thoughtful, "is a balance. Dr. Reed's crime was born of loyalty, not malice. This, the courts will consider." As Lady Beatrice left, Eleanor appeared at the door, her face pale but resolute. "Mr. Poirot, Charles and I wish to thank you. This ordeal, it's shown us what matters. We'll marry as planned, and the estate will be managed with care." Poirot smiled, his mustache twitching. "Mademoiselle, you have the strength of your father, but the wisdom to forge your own path. Thornfield Hall is in good hands." The household began to disperse, the guests preparing to depart. Sylvia, her usual vivacity subdued, offered Poirot a shy nod. "I misjudged you, Mr. Poirot. I thought you were just meddling. But you saw the truth." "Mademoiselle," Poirot replied, "the truth is a mirror, and we must all face it eventually." Lionel and Clara, their faces heavy with relief, said little, though Lionel clasped Poirot's hand firmly. Evelyn Warrender, ever observant, gave a wry smile. "You're a dangerous man, Mr. Poirot. You see too much." "Only what is there, Madame Warrender," Poirot said, his eyes twinkling. As the guests left the library, Hastings lingered with Poirot, who gazed out at the manicured lawns. "You know, Hastings," Poirot mused, "the human heart is a complex thing. It loves
Days. The recovery of Sir Henry Ashbourne's will and Dr. Malcolm Reed's confession had brought resolution, yet a subtle unease lingered, like dust motes stirred by a passing breeze. Hercule Poirot, preparing to depart for London with Captain Arthur Hastings, lingered in the drawing room,
his sharp eyes scanning the space where so many secrets had been laid bare. Hastings, packing his notebook and pen, sensed that his friend was not entirely satisfied, despite the case's apparent closure. "Poirot," Hastings ventured, adjusting his hat. "You've solved the mystery, returned the will, and caught the thief. Yet you seem restless. Is there something more?" Poirot's mustache twitched, his gaze distant. "Mon cher Hastings, the little grey cells, they are content, yet they murmur. The puzzle is complete, but the picture, it is not quite symmetrical. There is a detail, small but persistent, that does not sit well." Before Hastings could press further, Eleanor Ashburn entered, her blue gown a soft contrast to the room's heavy grandeur. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice steady but tinged with gratitude. "I've come to see you off. Charles and I are deeply grateful. Without you, this house might have been torn apart." Poirot bowed, his expression warm but guarded. "Mademoiselle, it is my duty to restore order. But tell me, you have read the will now that it is returned. Is all as you expected?" Eleanor hesitated, her fingers brushing the engagement ring on her hand. "Yes, mostly. The bequest to that woman. It was a surprise, but Mother has decided to honor it. Quietly. We want no more scandal." Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly. "And Monsieur Crane, he has confirmed the document's authenticity." "Yes," Eleanor replied. "He examined it this morning. The seal, the signature, everything is intact." Hastings glanced at Poirot, sensing the detective's unease. "What's troubling you, Poirot?" Reed confessed. "The will's back. What's left?" Poirot's smile was faint. "A question, mon ami. Why did Dr. Reed return to the library last night?" He had hidden the will behind the medical journals, a clever spot, unlikely to be found.
Always listening. Sylvia glanced nervously at Eleanor, then continued.
"It was Mr. Crane. I heard him speaking to Grayson in the study, just after breakfast. He said something about the will's terms being more complicated than they seem. He sounded worried, like he was hiding something." Eleanor's brow furrowed. "Mr. Crane? He's been our solicitor for years. Why would he say that?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A most interesting observation, Mademoiselle Sylvia. Let us summon Monsieur Crane at once." Grayson, ever efficient, fetched Victor Crane, who entered clutching his satchel, his spectacles slipping down his nose. "Mr. Poirot," he said, his voice unsteady, "I understand you're leaving. Is there a problem?" "Monsieur Crane," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, "you have confirmed the will's authenticity, oui? Yet Mademoiselle Sylvia overheard you suggest its terms are complicated. Explain, if you please." Crane's hands trembled, his eyes darting to Eleanor. I meant only that Sir Henry's instructions were precise. The bequest to the anonymous woman. It requires careful handling to avoid gossip." Poirot stepped closer, his gaze piercing. "And yet you did not mention this complexity before. Tell me, monsieur, is there another document, perhaps? A codicil, an amendment, that complicates the will?" Crane's face paled, and he sank into a chair. "You are too perceptive, Mr. Poirot. There is no codicil, but Sir Henry, before his death, spoke of revising the will. He never did, but he hinted at a second bequest to another party. I swore to keep it confidential unless a new will was drafted." The room stilled. Eleanor's voice was sharp. "Another bequest? To whom?" Crane shook his head. He wouldn't say. Only that it was a matter of honor, to right a wrong from his youth. I assumed it was another personal matter. Poirot's mustache twitched. "And Dr. Reed, did he know of this?" Crane hesitated. "I believe so.
Sir Henry consulted him about his health during those discussions. Reed may
Wrong about you. You've saved us from more than just a theft. Poirot bowed. Mademoiselle, the truth is its own reward. Outside, as the car awaited, Hastings turned to Poirot. That second bequest, it's still a mystery, isn't it? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Some mysteries, mon cher, are best left to the heart. The little grey cells have done their work. Let us return to London, where the tea is hot and the mysteries, they await. The car rolled away from Thornfield Hall, its secrets settled but not forgotten, leaving behind a family to heal and a detective whose genius had once again prevailed. Chapter 13. The Echoes of Secrets. The late afternoon of November 5th, 1925, cast a golden hue over Thornfield Hall, its lawns glistening with the remnants of yesterday's rain. The resolution of the will's theft and Dr. Malcolm Reed's confession had restored a fragile calm. But the revelation of a second, unconfirmed bequest in Sir Henry Ashburn's intentions lingered like an echo in the grand rooms. Hercule Poirot, preparing to depart for London with Captain Arthur Hastings, stood in the entrance hall, his suitcase neatly packed, his demeanour as meticulous as ever. Hastings, adjusting his scarf against the autumn chill, sensed that his friend was not entirely ready to leave the case behind. "Poirot," Hastings said, glancing back at the imposing facade of the manor, "you've tied up the loose ends. Reed's in custody, the will's safe, and the family's secrets are out. Yet you're still brooding. Is there something we've missed?" Poirot's green eyes gleamed with a familiar intensity. "Mon cher Hastings, a case is like a tapestry. We have woven the main threads, but there are fringes, small and subtle, that tug at the little grey cells. The second bequest Monsieur Crane mentioned, it is a shadow, undefined. I do not like shadows." Before Hastings could respond, the heavy oak door opened, and Charles Haverford appeared, his face grave but resolute. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, a word before you go. Eleanor and I have been Voice soft but charged. "This is no ordinary letter. It speaks of a child, a secret kept even from Monsieur Crane. Mademoiselle, do you understand its meaning?" Eleanor nodded, her eyes glistening. "I think so. Father, he had a child, outside of his marriage to Mother. The bequest Mr. Crane mentioned, it wasn't just for the woman, but for her child, wasn't it?" Poirot's expression was grave. "It appears so. The letter does not name the child, but it suggests Sir Henry intended to provide for them, perhaps in a revised will he never completed. This, then, was the true motive for Dr. Reed's theft, not only to protect his sister, but to conceal this greater scandal." Hastings's jaw dropped. "A child? Good heavens, Poirot, that changes everything. Reed must have known." "Précisément," Poirot said, folding the letter and returning it to Eleanor. "Dr. Reed, as Sir Henry's physician, likely knew of this child through private conversations. The will's exposure would have revealed not only his sister's affair, but this illegitimate heir, threatening the family's reputation and perhaps the estate's division." Charles, his arm around Eleanor, spoke up. "We've decided to investigate quietly. If this child exists, they deserve what father intended. But we want no public scandal. Can we trust your discretion, Mr. Poirot?" Poirot bowed, his tone solemn. "Monsieur, Mademoiselle, the secrets of Thornfield Hall are safe with Hercule Poirot. I seek only the truth, not its broadcast." As they spoke, Lady Beatrice entered, her face composed, but her eyes betraying a flicker of pain.
"Eleanor, you've shown him the letter?" she asked, her voice low. "Yes, Mother," Eleanor replied. "We owe it to Father to honor his wishes, even if they're painful." Lady Beatrice nodded, her gaze meeting Poirot's. "Mr. Poirot, you've uncovered more than we could have imagined. I thank you, though it wounds me to know Henry's secrets." "Madame," Poirot said gently, "the heart keeps its secrets, but the truth brings peace. You are a family of strength. You will endure." The group moved to the entrance,
The gravel drive, the manor receding into the distance. Hastings felt a pang of melancholy, knowing the family's journey was far from over. Yet, with Poirot's genius, the truth had prevailed, leaving Thornfield Hall to face its future with courage and clarity. The evening of November 5th, 1925, settled over Thornfield Hall with a quiet that felt almost reverent, as if the estate itself were exhaling after the tumult of the past days. The recovery of Sir Henry Ashburn's will, Dr. Malcolm Reed's confession, and the revelation of a secret child had left the household in a state of cautious reflection. Hercule Poirot, his suitcase packed and his mind still sharp, stood in the entrance hall, preparing to depart with Captain Arthur Hastings. The Belgian detective's green eyes, however, gleamed with the faint unrest of a man who sensed one final thread in the tapestry of the mystery. "Poirot," Hastings said, adjusting his coat against the evening chill, "you've solved the case, restored the will, and uncovered secrets even the family didn't know. Yet you're still prowling like a cat. What's left?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Mon cher Hastings, the little gray cells, they are satisfied, but they are also curious. The letter Mademoiselle Eleanor found, it speaks of a child, a debt of honor. But there is a question. Why did Sir Henry not act on this before his death? The answer, I suspect, lies in the silence of another." Before Hastings could press further, Lionel Ashbourne appeared, his florid face softened by a rare humility. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, his voice gruff, "I owe you an apology. I was resistant to your methods, but you've saved us from a mess. I'd like a word before you go." Poirot inclined his head. "Monsieur, speak freely. The truth, it is always welcome." Lionel glanced around, ensuring they were alone, then lowered his voice. "That letter Eleanor found, it's stirred things up. I knew Henry had his secrets, but a child? I think I know who the mother might be. Years ago, Henry was close to..." Suggests he, too, knew more than he admitted. As if summoned, Victor Crane appeared, his satchel clutched tightly. "Mr. Poirot, I heard you were leaving." I must confess something. I've not been entirely forthcoming." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "Monsieur Crane, the time for secrets is past. Speak." Crane hesitated, his voice barely a whisper. "Sir Henry, he told me Anna Marwood had a child, and he wanted to provide for them. He was preparing a codicil to the will, but he died before it was finalized. I kept silent because he asked me to, and I feared it would destroy the family." Poirot's eyes gleamed with triumph. "And Dr. Reed knew this, oui? He feared the codicil's existence, even if unwritten, would come to light if the will was scrutinized too closely." Crane nodded, his shoulders sagging. "Reed confronted me once, asking if Henry had added anything about Anna. I told him no, but he didn't believe me. He must have thought stealing the will would buy time to find out," Hastings scribbled furiously, his heart racing. "So Reed was protecting two secrets, his sister's affair and this child's existence. No wonder he was desperate." "Indeed," Poirot said, turning to Lionel. "Monsieur, your suspicion about Anna Marwood confirms this. The letter Mademoiselle Eleanor found, it was Sir Henry's attempt to acknowledge his past.
But fate intervened. Lionel's face softened, a rare vulnerability showing. I should have spoken up sooner. Henry was my brother, but I let pride keep me silent. Poirot placed a hand on Lionel's arm. Monsieur, the past is a heavy burden, but you have lightened it today. The Ashbournes will find their way. As they stepped into the car, the sun dipping below the horizon, Hastings turned to Poirot. You tied it all together, Poirot. The thread, the scratch, the letter, every detail mattered. Poirot smiled, adjusting his hat. The little grey cells, mon cher. They see the pattern where others see only chaos. Now, let us leave Thornfield Hall to its healing, and return to the simplicity of London. The car pulled away, the manor candlelight. You've unraveled a tangle of secrets, Reed's theft, the hidden child, Anna Marwood. Yet, you seem almost melancholy. Is it really over? Poirot's green eyes twinkled, though his expression was somber. Mon cher Hastings, a case is never truly over for those who live its consequences. The little grey cells have done their work, but the heart, it carries the scars. The Ashbournes will heal, but they will not forget. The door opened and Eleanor Ashbourne appeared, her face serene, yet marked by the strain of recent days. Charles Haverford stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her arm. Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, Eleanor said, her voice warm. We cannot thank you enough. You've given us clarity, even if it came at a cost. Poirot bowed, his moustache twitching slightly. Mademoiselle, clarity is the foundation of peace. You and Monsieur Haverford will build a future worthy of Thornfield Hall. And the child? Will you seek them? Eleanor nodded, her eyes resolute. We will, discreetly. Father's wishes must be honored, even if it means facing difficult truths. Mother agrees, though it pains her. Charles added, We've asked Mr. Crane to begin inquiries about Anna Marwood. If her child exists, they'll be provided for, as Sir Henry intended. Bon, Poirot said, his tone approving. You show wisdom, monsieur. Mademoiselle, the past cannot be undone, but it can be mended. Lady Beatrice joined them, her grey gown a symbol of transition from mourning to resolve. Mr. Poirot, she said, her voice steady but softer than before, you have exposed my husband's secrets, yet you've preserved our dignity. I misjudged you. Poirot's smile was gentle. Madame, to judge is human, to understand is divine. You have a family of strength. Trust in them. Sylvia Ashbourne, lingering near the door, stepped forward, her usual bravado softened. Mr. Poirot, I was wrong to doubt you. You saw through all of us, didn't you? Mademoiselle, Poirot replied, I see only what the heart reveals. Your honesty in the end helped light the way. Lion, that letter, the child, it's a weighty secret to leave behind. Do you think they'll find them? Poirot adjusted his hat, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The Ashbournes have courage, mon cher. They will seek, and they will find. As for Hercule Poirot, my role is done. The little grey cells, they rest until the next mystery calls. The car rolled down the gravel drive, Thornfield Hall fading into the twilight, its windows glowing like eyes watching their departure. Hastings leaned back, his notebook closed, reflecting on the intricate dance of clues, the blue silk thread, the scratch, the footsteps, the letter, that Poirot had woven into a tapestry of truth. The manor, with its secrets and its strength, would endure, a testament to the power of understanding over chaos. As they neared the station, the stars emerging above the Devonshire hills, Poirot spoke softly. The human heart, Hastings, it is a labyrinth. But with method, with observation, we find the way out. Always. Hastings smiled, knowing that wherever the next mystery lay, Poirot's genius would light the path. The train whistle sounded in the distance, calling them back to London, to tea, to order, and to the promise of new enigmas waiting to be solved.